Are you ready, Amanda?
Yes.
So you want me to go at 5?
Yes, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Loretta Walsh, and I am a Wilmington City Council member at large. This is a virtual public safety meeting for the Wilmington City Council. And before we get started, I would like council members in attendance and any staff member who's part of this today to introduce themselves.
Michelle Harlee, representing the 4th Councilmanic District.
Linda Gray, Representative 1st District.
Bud Friel, 8th District.
Sam Guy at large.
Maribel Sejo, council staff.
Rashima Dixon at large.
Councilmember Johnson.
Good evening, Chairwoman, Councilman Johnson, 7th District, Vice Chair. Good evening.
Thank you. Okay, before we get started, it's a little upside down today.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, I also am on the
Oh,
call.
sorry.
Hanifa Shabazz, President, City Council. Sorry, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Well,
Madam Chair, this is Councilman Yolanda McCoy, 6th District as well.
thank you. The first, before we get to the first item on the agenda, the second item, the resolution to approve a collective bargaining agreement is going to be withdrawn today. So we'll get right to, who is here from the police department, please?
Madam Chair, Chief Robert Tracy. I have Inspector Cecilia Ash, Inspector Chuck Embry, and also Director of Policy and Communications for Wilmington Police Department, David Karras. We're all in the same room at this time.
Thank you, Chief. Welcome.
Thank you.
So I think what we would like today is just an overview of Saturday, March 30th, 2020 in our city. It was obvious lessons learned from a couple things with this past weekend, which congratulations to all that were at the March rally this past Friday. So could you give us a bit of an overall, Chief?
Sure. We were prepared for a rally march protest that started in Rodney Square. It was the kickoff at 11 o'clock with some announcements, and it was supposed to go for a couple of hours, but we were out there by 10, knowing what is potentially happening in other cities. We prepared for it to be a peaceful march, and that it was. Went out there, made sure that we were out there showing support, helping facilitate everyone's First Amendment rights to free speech. And we started out Rodney Square for a peaceful demonstration. Demonstrators then marched to the Wilmington Police Department headquarters, later moved on to portions of I-95, and then other areas throughout the city. These demonstrations were primarily peaceful. Our officers, myself included, walked with them. During the course of the whole day and into the night, many of my officers, I tracked almost over 10 miles and we communicated with organizers and attendees throughout the day. Our officers also blocked traffic, assisted demonstrators to ensure they would remain safe and that they would not be at risk of being injured by motorists. Later in the evening, following the conclusion of the demonstrations, about 15 to 25 minutes after the last individuals dispersed and concluded their gathering, we had a number of individuals that used the time when everybody was dispersing from out in front of 4th and Walton, engaging in criminal mischief and criminal activity, predominantly going up Market Street, and towards the end of the night, you could see where a lot of the things happened in those areas. Our officers worked to assist residents and business owners, as well as other members of the public who were in the area. We received assistance from the state police and the county police during the evening, and while some individuals were breaking windows and breaking into businesses and stealing items. We made 4 arrests into Sunday morning, 2 for resisting arrest and 2 for burglary, shoplifting, and criminal mischief charges. We have active investigations at this time to the criminal activity that took place early Sunday morning, which are ongoing at this time. So a lot of it's been put out in the media. A lot of it's been out on some of the periodicals, and some of the details were there. There were some damages to property. Overall, we were able to make sure that we concluded it getting into Sunday morning and continued to keep the city safe, to make sure it didn't turn into like many, many other cities throughout the United States.
Thank you, Chief. Council members?
My hand is up, Councilwoman Walsh.
I don't see it here on mine at all. Yes,
Uh,
Councilmember Harlee.
Okay, thank you, Councilwoman. So Chief, thanks for that overview. My question is this. To my understanding, the march started at Rodney Square, as you said, and it went to the city county building before it went to a public safety building. Did you just,
Right.
by design, did you leave it out, or did you not know it, or what?
Well, there's so many other places that I could have stopped. I wanted to make sure I'm sensitive to everybody's time. If I detailed, there's a lot of places they stopped in the middle of the street and protested, peacefully protested, and ensured on King, MLK, onto 95, off, and they repeated a lot of locations. Yes, but they did go to the city county building and express themselves. And 1 or 2 individuals that we've identified threw rocks at the city county building and 1 at the state building.
Oh, okay. And the only reason why I thought it was worth mentioning, because to my understanding, the group that started at Rodney Square, when they went to the city county building, they went back or they left. So that first group that was the peaceful protesters, they were really trying to differentiate themselves from the group that moved on to the public safety building. So that's why I brought it up.
And Councilwoman, if we didn't have the help of some formal and some informal leaders and the relationships that we've had and we've built over the last 3 years, from going to every community meeting, going to every event and having offices there, we knew a lot of the individuals that were in the rally, the march, the protest, and a lot of them, because of our relationships, helped us diffuse a lot of the situations that possibly, especially if it came to criminal activity and or looting, well, it's the same thing, looting, criminal activity, to make sure that we can keep it safe. And there was a lot of emotions, rightfully so, on what was going on and in relation to what happened in Minneapolis. So I believe a lot of the things, while we had some successes and we had some setbacks, it probably could have been a lot worse if we didn't have those community members working with us and trying to make sure that we can keep the peace and make sure that emotions didn't run so high that there would have been more damage, especially during the day. And then into the evening, I think we saw how we had to get things under control. But you're absolutely right. There was different factions within the group, and to keep it peaceful, I appreciate everybody from the community coming together and for their cause and in trying to ensure that make sure that things didn't get out of control.
Understood. Thank you.
Chief, I think one thing you had working against you that Saturday was also, there were a whole lot of rumors on the street, and you could see most of the action live from various people that were taping it that day.
Correct.
And you walking on the street really helped out to dispel some of those rumors.
Yes.
So I think that was a good move on your part.
Well, absolutely. And that goes back to my training from my former police departments. If you're going to lead, you got to be on the front lines. And that's the way I've been taught. And internally, that's the way I am. Because I'm not going to ask my officers to do something that I'm not willing to do. And of course, when people see your leadership out there, out in front and having those conversations, first, my expectation is going to be peaceful protests. I have nothing else. I'm not looking at it any other way. Where the posture of other departments immediately went out there and they had helmets and shields and nightsticks, and that's not the posture that we want to have. That's not the posture that I believe we should have in the city of Wilmington, because there were some bad actors, some from outside the city and some driving others on emotion towards the end of the night. But all in all, as you can see how things continued through the week. I mean, Sunday we had a protest in front of the city council building on Sunday evening on May 31st. We have one on June 3rd. We then had our big one at Tubman Garrett Park. Everybody marched up in front of the county court building, and we saw the results of that. And then towards the end of the night, we had others that continued, but it ended peacefully because of the relationships that we have and the conversations we had with those individuals to make sure it was a safe and successful night. And then we had on Saturday, June 6th, Father Tucker Park, and then once again we had a vigil, and then Tubman Garrett Park again, drummers, and that all went very peacefully. And then yesterday in Speakman Park, we had individuals that were there, and we helped facilitate that. They know us, making even especially going into the neighborhoods, relationships that we have from our captains and our officers and our inspectors and lieutenants. And sergeants. It just we were able to have those conversations and give people a call to say, hey, how can we help? How can we help facilitate that? And I think it was met with very well to help people have their voice heard.
Council members?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I just
Council
wanted to share,
President.
thank you, ma'am. I'd just like to share with not just the police, but all of us here in the city of Wilmington, that I was speaking to people from outside of Wilmington, Middletown, and especially from Smyrna, and they were really acknowledging the standard that we set in dealing in this very toxic moment, how we handled and stood the test of time, and was able to set a standard of how to deal with what we were dealing with. And they were just acknowledging that they were very proud of Wilmington, and was looking for their own little individual cities to kind of mimic how we handled, the emotions, and worked in a collaborative so there was as less damage as possible, and resulted in a great demonstration of collaboration and peace. So I thought it would be wanted to share those with all of us who had something to do with it, even though there were many of us who were, even from our home, sending prayers and positive energy to our city. So I just wanted to share that with you.
And Council President, just having the elected officials engage with activists, organizers, community members, and getting together and really trying to share what are the goals and what they're doing and how to keep everyone safe. Other cities, a lot of them, when they started doing some of the things that we were doing, things were already going sideways. And I keep talking about the community coming together and in all aspects, even business leaders, elected officials, just making that effort. I think, the model you talk about is why, where we are today, and we're talking about it. Some things that we've had, some events that I wish didn't happen, but then we got ahead of it pretty quickly to be where we are today. So thank you.
Yeah. And if I could say that, even talking to not just this particular incident, but there's been other things that Wilmington has done. I guess from the inside, you look at it and you say, well, we could do it better, and how come? And, you think that we're not on the cutting edge. But if you talk to some other cities across the country, Wilmington does maintain a high standard of performance in several things that we do. And so I'm always proud to say that I'm from Wilmington, Delaware, and that, we love our city, and regardless of our missteps and headaches and sore spots, that we still eventually do love the city, and we all are working to the betterment good. So know that other people are looking at us, and they look at us with high regards.
Councilmember Gray?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to echo my council members' praise of the police department for keeping the demonstrations at the level that they stayed at with the minimum destruction, and also keeping us safe and protecting the citizens of Wilmington. But now that we have accomplished that successfully, we need to move on and look at where we're going to go from here and how quickly we can move ahead and put some legislation or some ideas or something that will cut down or make sure that our city doesn't have the type of police violence that we've heard of and seen in other areas. And since I was traveling back and forth, I really wasn't aware of what happened before with this gentleman McDowell. And it has come to my understanding that there are impediments in Delaware law to bringing a conviction or any type of punishment.
Councilmember Gray,
And I think that we need to go
Councilmember
forward looking
Gray.
at those type of things. And I think it's Title 11, 464. I'm just bringing this to the public. They can go on the internet and look for themselves. These are the type of things that I think we need to be looking at going forward. And I'd really like the police chief's input, since it was put out in public that we're going to be having a additional information on Wilmington Police Department Policy and Procedures Manual. And then also it was put out that we're going to have the body cams. And I want to know if anything's different.
Councilmember Gray, could you please address it when the issue comes up? That
This
if
is
you
the
want to
time. This is-
distract-
Councilwoman Walsh, I am really fed up with you interrupting me. This is a public service commission
You're
meeting.
supposed to be an adult
Committee
too.
meeting.
You're an
And I am
adult.
speaking to the police chief.
Well, you can pick
about
up the
public
phone
service.
if you have personal information you want to get from him, you can pick up the phone and do that.
I don't want
Otherwise,
to get any personal information. This is for the
otherwise,
public.
Could we
we're
have a
going
point
to
of order,
follow
please?
the agenda.
It is not public with something that was put out public. This is a news release and I'm
You're
reading
going
from
to file,
our
you're going to
president
follow the
and
agenda,
Mayor
Council.
Pazicki put out.
Who else
How
has
is
a
that
question?
personal?
Councilmember Guy,
I'm not interrupting, Councilwoman. Is she
so your
finished?
hand is up. So do you have a question or not?
Okay. The first thing is that one of our problems in Wilmington that the public understands, and that's part of the reason why Wilmington was torn up. And that is that the public does see its government and how it operates.
Councilmember
some
Guy, are you going
places
to
that
address
didn't get
last
torn up.
Friday?
Excuse me?
Are you going to address last Friday?
I just said Friday, the reason why the city was torn up is because of some of the kind of things that happen here on Wilmington City Council. There's other cities and towns where nothing happened because the people's issues are being addressed. People weren't just tearing up Wilmington on Friday because of George Floyd. That was like somebody lighting a match in a country where it was gas, and different cities and towns had different reactions, partly a function of how the people are treated. And in this city, whether it's city council or the residents, Black people understand that it's a total disrespect. Even Black elected officials are subject to white supremacy. So that's why Wilmington partly got
Councilmember
torn
Guy,
up.
get to an overview.
I'm talking
Saturday.
about why the city was torn up. Also, if you notice, one thing I noticed on the mall, and that is that the land bank building had signs in it that said Black owned. That was something interesting that took place on Friday. There was also certain people's businesses that were protected and other people's businesses were allowed to be torn up. Everybody at the street level that knows what's going on knows about that. We also know that the media and all of this, everything was perfect, copacetic. It's because there's control over how things are reported about what happened in Wilmington. So I'm glad we only had one day of a problem. That's a good thing. We didn't have to have Wilmington torn up the way that it was. We were not prepared to take advantage of the assistance that could have been available for Wilmington to not be as torn up as it was. Okay, so I thank the Lord and I thank the police department for doing what they did, but there could have been more hands on deck. And I don't know if that's our fault for not asking for help or whether folks refused to give us help. But the town was too small for all the damage that took place. The other thing is that there weren't communications going out.
Are these questions
Oh,
you're asking the police chief?
No, I'm talking about what happened. And I know you don't like to hear what a black
No.
man has to say.
This subject is an
So I'm
overview
talking
of
about
Saturday.
Friday. Isn't he talking about the day, the events that took place?
Yes.
Okay, well, that's what I'm talking about. One day you'll learn to let black people speak too.
Oh, Mr. Guy, you know, save your little liar.
And if I'm a
platform for
sellout,
stuff.
you won't interrupt me. If I'm
I
a
agree.
sellout, you won't
me up.
interrupt me. You should just let me have my minutes. And then you can.
Why?
go
So
ahead.
you can continue
your
to
thing.
spread the
No.
history of the world according to Sam Guy?
Hey,
No.
I'm telling you what I lived. And I know that the city of Wilmington didn't reach out to all members of council and keep all members of council abreast of what was going on. That was done purpose because we live in an organization that doesn't take
And do you
advantage of
think the
all
police-
people's ability to assist. It has to only be one way. So that's part of why.
And do you
Wilmington
think
is
the
split up.
police department
Excuse me?
reached out to other council members?
I'm saying they didn't have wholesale reach out and notification on a regular basis
Yeah,
as to
like
what was going on and what
maybe
they
they were a
might have
little
needed help
busy.
with. And you're talking while I'm talking. You're the chair, so you get an hour to talk. So I'm just sharing from my perspective, and your perspective is no more valid than mine. Now, I was at Rodney Square on Friday morning. So when you talk about being with the people and interacting with the people, I was there, and there was a few council members there as well. So I was there, and
Yes, I
speak
understand there were,
to
and
the
as soon
people.
as
And
soon
I
as
got
things
to
started
speak
going back, you
to
all
the
left.
people. Excuse me?
Are you finished now, Mr.
No,
Guy?
I'm not,
Because
because
we're
you keep
still on the
interrupting me.
overview.
You keep exercising white supremacy, interrupting me.
Oh, please.
I was at
Do
Rodney
any other
Square,
council members have any questions?
and nobody tore up anything when I was at Rodney Square that morning, and I spoke to the group. I was also,
It was noticed as soon as things started getting torn up, you left. That was noticed.
no, I
Who else
didn't
has
leave
questions
soon
for
as things
council?
got torn up, and I didn't
If
see
nobody
you
else
either.
has questions, I'm going to take it to members of the public.
I actually do, Madam Chair.
Because you don't want to hear the truth.
Yes, Councilmember Johnson.
Yes, so specifically, Chief Tracy, I do have a question about Nixle, because that is, I think, the experience of me and a lot of my colleagues. Just, we did try to keep our neighborhoods up to date. In the future, is Nixle possibly going to be used to communicate even, what protests are going on, just so, and what traffic closures are happening, just so people can stay up to date? Because that is something that, even on my side of town, I did experience a lot of, was just folks spreading misinformation. So is there thought in the future of using Nixle or a different platform to communicate better?
Council member, everything's being looked at, and to see, after action review, there's some things that we'll always look at things if we can do it better. If it's through Nixle, it's through another platform. Yes, the answer is yes, and we're looking at everything, and as we should, because even if things think we did everything right, I don't ever think we do anything right. There's no perfection. We have to always see what we can do better and learn from the experience that we just went through. And the simple answer is yes, we will be looking at all of that, and I'll definitely give you an update on that.
Okay, I appreciate that, because that is, again, was at the top of my mind. I think kind of on line with Councilman Guy. It is, there's a lot of misinformation out there, and I think even in this day and time, we try to be more clear. And that is one thing. There were many conspiracy theories floating, specifically about Antifa, this group, that group. And I think it led to a lot of fear among residents. And so what I'm trying to do is at least on council side, if we can try to allay some of those fears and just, hey, tell the community, you can go to Nixle, you can go here, this will be the accurate information. That would be helpful, I think, from council side, because it is something obviously we hope we don't have to face again. But again, there are going to be future protests, there are going to be future demonstrations. So at least we should be a go-to source so that the community can get the information that they need. So at least they can stay safe. Maybe don't go downtown because the street's going to be blocked off, or at least plan for that. That's all I was trying to put out there. So thank you.
And we tried to use that. We also had them. We also had the coming out of the mayor's office where the closures were going to be. And then I know you could appreciate that as this thing's moving, we're trying to identify what groups are out there that are presenting themselves, that are coming from the outside. It was an emergency situation, very fluid, trying to identify what was going on at the time and who the actors were as we're going through it. So that's why I talked about the investigations are continuing. And there were groups that possibly were not from Wilmington, but we're doing our investigation on it because that's a broader thing that's happening. And then with the help of our federal partners, they're taking a good look at that as well. I don't want to speak on behalf or get too far ahead who they might be. We want to make sure that we're getting everything right with the intelligence information we're receiving. And some things we can talk about, some things we can't, obviously if it's under investigation, but we will definitely continue to look out. If things were happening, can we do it better and what can we put out?
Okay, thank you, Chief.
Councilmember Adams, would you like to be recognized as present?
Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry, I was a little slow with the trigger there on the mute switch. Yes, I am. The only thing I would like to say is, again, relative to every other city, our police officers and security people did a very commendable job, and we certainly were better off than where the other cities were too. So again, hey, people have a right to protest. I'm glad they kept it peaceful on Friday evening, and it seems like our police crew, the chief and his troops did a very good job. Thank you.
Councilmember Harlee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did want to just mention that on Friday, there was a picture circulating on social media of some bricks in front of the Riverfront Market. There was a lot of buzz going around. I got a lot of emails because, as Councilman Johnson mentioned, Antifa is supposed to be known for when they're going to make a hit on the city, they deliver bricks. This is, I guess, alleged, but I did read up on this on the internet that, when they do decide to take a hit on the city, they deliver bricks, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess a number of people Google that information as well. So I was able to reach out to the officers on duty at the riverfront to get them, one, to go over there to make sure that there were no bricks there, because like I said, there was a picture circulating with bricks, pallets of bricks in front of the Riverfront Market. So the Wilmington Police Department, the officers did go over there. They confirmed that the bricks were not there and that the bricks were actually bricks from a historical building that was put there by whoever was, I guess, working on the building, doing a demolition down at the riverfront. They wanted to preserve these bricks because they're historical bricks. And they was explaining how bricks from an old building don't look the same way as the bricks from that you purchase new
Right.
bricks. So they did explain that, and I wanted that to go on public record because a lot of people were asking and emailing me and texting me about the pallets of bricks, but that's where the bricks came from. And I want to say the WPD, they checked that out quickly and got back to me. So I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Thank you.
I believe, Chief, that once you put all of your recommendations together that people are giving to you and part of your overview, that might be added to your list to just have somebody check whether or not there are construction sites going on in the city if we have a big planned rally again. So, Councilmember Guy?
Yes, also, there's a gentleman named George Floyd, who there's nothing wrong with his name being mentioned, given what happened to him. And people in Wilmington also remember Albert Butler and Jeremy McDowell as local people who were killed by the Wilmington Police Department. And so the people who are victimized are just as important as all of the rah-rah, who did this, who did that. In fact, they're more important. Now, at the end of the day with all of this, it is true what's going to happen next, policy-wise. So I see there is something on the agenda, and that's good because Wilmington, Delaware has been an organization that has not been willing to address the kind of things that could have prevented what happened here in Wilmington. So we'll get to see what kind of people we are now that things have been torn up, unfortunately. That's all I have, Madam President.
Any other council members? Would any members of the public like to say anything? Hearing none, we don't have to vote on anything with this, but we look forward to reading your report sometime in the future, Chief. The next resolution, Councilmember Johnson, this is yours. Would you like to take it over, please?
Yes, Chairwoman, thank you so very much. At this time, I would like to present item number 3 on the agenda. It's a resolution for the Wilmington Police Department to provide the police department's policies and procedures manual, which is known as, also known as the White Book. And I'm calling for it to be published online for view by the public in a format that is not substantially redacted. This piece of legislation, I believe Councilman Guy alluded to, was as to what the next step is. And unfortunately, this legislation has been long overdue in the city of Wilmington. There are many jurisdictions, dozens of jurisdictions, 35 specifically that we even know of around the country that have already published the policies and procedures online. This includes Seattle, Washington, Fair Lawn, New Jersey, Newark, New Jersey, Brunswick, Georgia, and even Lower Marion Township right up the road. And so there's many jurisdictions that have already done this. I believe this is, again, going towards talk about reform. This is something that's easy, and it's something that I implore the Wilmington Police Department to get behind. I know there's been talk in the past about what can be publicly shown, what can't be, but from my knowledge, extensive knowledge of FOIA, having worked on it both in this local city level and also the state level, the only exceptions to publishing would be anything that puts WPD or city personnel under personal risk or risk of safety or a terrorist attack. That's pursuant to the Delaware FOIA Act. So it's a very, very narrow set of regulations that can't be published. Otherwise, things like use of force, regulations dealing with chokeholds, regulations dealing with tactics, that all should be publicly available. And now we do have a push right now in the community for reform. But the problem is the community doesn't even know exactly what needs to be reformed, because unless you're an attorney or someone working within the city, you don't even know what policies are in the books. The public doesn't know what tactics are banned already by Wilmington Police. Because I understand Chief Tracy has made a considerable effort to revise use of force, but we still have a long way to go. So this is, again, a first step. Thus, as council, I would like us to be unified in this vision of best practices and just letting the public know what WPD is about. In this way, we can educate the community, because the pressure is not just on the police, but the pressure is on the community. Is that the community wants less policing, the community wants less engagement and more positive interactions. And I believe this is going to go a long way. So again, I know this has been debated in the past. I understand there were past delays, but I believe we're way past that. And I believe we have to be unified in getting this forward. And what I'm asking for is that this be something that, again, I know the administration supports, but it's something we need forthwith, like no delays, no more delays. Let's get this going. And hopefully within the next 60 to 90 days, we can have it online. Thank you.
Councilmember McCoy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my question is, I do realize that now we will, with this resolution, I guess we'll be placing that white book or the information from it online. And of course, some will probably be omitted, as you stated that, I guess we will put, persons in harm's way. But I would like to find out whether or not the council as a whole, my colleagues and myself, will we actually get a hard copy of that, since we will not, that information will not be put online.
Councilwoman McCoy, that's a great question. It's something I can, and if Chief Tracy is here to discuss that, we could certainly talk about that or talk about it offline. That's a great question. I think an unredacted version should be accessible. Again, I believe there is a past history of maybe information getting out publicly. So I think that's the only thing, is if it was released to council members, they would have to be, strictly would have to attest to. They'd probably have to sign an oath or something, that it won't get publicly released. Because I believe that is the question that the police may have, is that, they don't want to give it to us and then the full version gets out there publicly anyway. So, again, I think that's to discuss with the police department in a way that we can pragmatically go forward with that.
I have nothing more.
Council President Shabazz. Council President. Council President Gray.
Madam Chair.
Madam Chair.
I'm going to say that I support this. I think this is a great idea, and I suggest that I not get interrupted again. But committee meetings are where we're supposed to be able to discuss opinions, ideas on the subject. The subject we're discussing is police brutality, police violence. I support this, but there are other ways in conjunction with this that we can attack the problem or prevent the problem from coming to Wilmington. And one thing I'm going to suggest is that everyone read the Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights. And in this Bill of Rights, along with the rules and regulations, there are rights that are given to police officers that are not afforded to the average citizen. And I really think that the police officers should be held at a higher standard. And one of the things is, and anyone who's been arrested would realize this, if you're arrested, you can be detained for 24 to 48 hours without ever being charged or ever being told what you're being charged for. But in the Police Bill of Rights, they have to be told immediately before they're questioned what they're being charged for. There are a lot of inequities that also would go a long way to help people trust the police and for them to put on an equal footing with the public, so they understand how we feel if we get arrested or if we are investigated. And as I started to say before, one of the things that prevents officers from being investigated and prosecuted in this state is Title IV, Section 464, which is the Bill of Rights. So I'm just suggesting to the public to look at that. I agree with this resolution. I want this resolution to go forth, but I also want us to look at the Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights and change some of those things or moderate them. I think that is also a workable solution. Thank you.
Councilmember Gray.
Yeah, and I just want to follow up, Councilwoman Gray. Thank you for that suggestion. Chairwoman Walsh and I have already started talking about these issues. Again, we understand that the Law Enforcement Officer Bill of Rights can be an impediment to some of the reforms we're talking about. And so I completely agree with you that there needs to be a tweak of it. I don't know if it's a wholesale repeal or just tweaking certain parts so that we can have, again, hold the good officers accountable. Because when I talk in the community, it is, I'm sure you have the same experience. 95% of officers are doing what they're supposed to do, and the bad officers make it worse for everyone else. So I think us making these changes and changing at the state level will go a long way. Thank you.
And Councilmember
Madam Chair.
Johnson, Councilmember Gray, you were out of order with what you just said, because this is about the White Book, which is completely separate from the Police Bill of Rights. One
We
is a
have
state
different
law.
opinions. We have different
What is
opinions.
the
This is a
state law?
committee meeting about public service, public safety. I'm sorry. And this is where when I came on council,
Stop
I was
interrupting
told
me.
committee meeting is where you discuss your ideas and issues when the subject comes up. And the subject is not just about one day or one incident. It's about police brutality, Black lives, Black
Point of
men
order.
being killed. This is the place to discuss it. I don't know why
Councilmember-
you keep trying to shut me down.
Because you're
I
out
don't
of,
keep trying to shut you down.
I'm done now.
You want everybody to read what you want them to read, and obviously you don't read the rules. So why don't you start doing that? And the second thing is, if you want something done about the State Bill of Rights, nobody's has you tied up. Put a resolution together to send down to Dover on it. Don't expect everybody else to do the work for you.
I've never asked any of you to do any work for me, and a resolution doesn't do anything
Councilmember-
except
Council
give our
President.
opinion. And you just
Council
started coming
President.
back anyways.
Council President Shabazz.
thank you, Madam Chair. Okay. I forgot what I was going to say.
Can't imagine why.
This is just the beginning of our work. This is just the beginning. We know that there are things, if we went through all the legislation that has inequities and, that are, the inequities, disparities, that is just adds to the systemic racial and classisms that, our country deals with. There are many of them. We can find them. This is just the very beginning. And, I think one of the beginning things we wanted to do when we first came on council was for every committee to kind of review the portion of the code that comes under their governance and, clean it up, amend it, bring it up to speed. And so I encourage all of you to take the time to go through the code. I mean, one of the things that our former President Obama, through his Obama Foundation, his My Brother's Keeper, he charged mayors and city council members across the country, because we do have access to making laws that govern our city. And he challenged all of us to take a pledge that we would commit to some following actions. And those 4 actions are to review your police use of force policies, to engage your communities, to include diverse range of input and experiences, and stories in our review, report the findings of the review to your community and seek feedback, and to reform your community's police use of force policies. So I encourage all of us to, come to the table, roll up your sleeves, pull out the code, and let's get to work.
Council President.
That's what's going to
Council
happen.
President,
Yes, ma'am.
what do you have to say about the White Book? That's what we're on.
And I'm sorry, and with the White Book to me is first knowing the process and procedures. That's why I forgot my point. I'm sorry. For the White Book is for us to now understand and learn better the process and modes of operations of the police force, so that we could have understanding when we go through the any other policies need to be done. Thank you. Thank you for getting me back on track. I forgot where I was.
Thank you. Councilmember Harlee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So first, I want to be added on the resolution as a co-sponsor. I think that this is a good start in terms of getting information out, and part of how we're going to be able to move forward is gaining more trust from the community. And I think this is a step in that direction, having some transparency where the community can feel like, hey, they know what their rights are, and they know pretty much, what the same information that our officers are privy to. But as it relates to the Bill of Rights, now we can stick to the White Book, but I just want to say that it does seem like since we are in a crisis moment and we, this came upon us unaware, and, our whole city and we as council members are feeling the blunt of what's going on, I would think that we can talk a little freely about solutions and how we can move forward and give the community some confidence that we as council members are taking this serious. And I think that I can't speak for Councilwoman Gray, but I can speak for myself as it relates to, we have short-term solutions that we can work on, and I think long-term, and I do think that that Bill of Rights is part of the systematic institutional racism that has empowered the bad guys. And so
Council member,
I'm done. I'm
okay.
done.
Well, I just want to add something to that on you. Again,
Mhm.
it's a state law as opposed to a city policy.
I
And the second
understand.
thing is, that was passed over 20 years ago. 20 years ago.
Yeah, okay. I do appreciate your comments. One, even though it is a state law, but it does not stop us from talking about it and trying to identify some action steps and the path forward, number one.
It certainly doesn't, but I
Okay.
guess my only point is, it
Uh-huh.
can be on the agenda for the next public safety meeting. We
Okay,
can have a
but
free-for-all and discuss it openly.
I understand what you're saying, Council Member Walsh. It's just that, if you don't bring it up to have a little discussion about it, then, healthy discussion, we don't have to stay on it, but we're in a crisis moment and our nation is in a crisis. And I think, we don't have a whole lot of time, to push things off. And so I feel as though we have to be considerate of the times that we're living in and what's going on. We're not in a regular state of committee
Well,
meetings.
believe me, council member, I'm not pushing anything off.
No,
And
I didn't say
I
you
feel-
were. No, I didn't say you were. I was just making a statement. I'm not insinuating anything. I'm just making statements and a comment,
All I'm
Madam Chair.
asking is people stick to the agenda.
Yes, that's
That's
what
it.
we're doing, the topics of the agenda. And so that's all I have to say. I want to be a co-sponsor
you.
on a resolution, and I think that's a great idea, Councilmember Gray. Thank you.
Councilmember Dixon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just had a question around, so is this going to be is the white book going to be able to be vetted on a regular basis? Are we going to be able to come back to this? So we now see it and that there's things in there that we think should be changed. Will we come back to it and update it and make changes with the chief? Or is this a one-time kind of deal with just putting up what the current thing is?
So that's a great question, Councilwoman Dixon. And based on how other cities have done it, it would be updated periodically. I mean, I think Seattle just updated theirs on March 1st. So it's something where us working with the department, the department, number one, based upon their certifications in CALEA, they have certain sections they have to update yearly anyway to keep their certifications. So we would stay abreast of that. And then maybe it'll be yearly, maybe it'll be twice a year. I'm not sure how it could work. Obviously, we can work as a team to figure that out. But it is something where it will get updated online, periodically. The hope is that we would be involved with that changes, what changes would be made.
Madam Chair, Chief Tracy.
Yes.
So
My hand is up and you just passed it 4 times. My hand is up. You let 4 people go ahead of me. That's why I
Mr.
said
Guy,
it's racism.
Mr. Guy, if I may, the rules are also that committee members get to speak before non-committee members.
And the police officer is not a committee member, but he is white. And I know you believe in that stuff, white supremacy. My hand was up.
You know, you're cut off from me. You are such a disgrace.
No,
are
you're
full
a
of
disgrace
cancer in this-
because you're the reason why we haven't addressed these issues.
Oh, right.
You-
Keep telling yourself that.
That's right. I got your voting record. It'll be online tonight.
I'll put this in residency both on the next agenda. Councilmember Johnson, would you like the chief to have the floor if he has a question?
Yes, that actually. Be preferred.
I'm next. So, Mr. Johnson, are you joining
Councilman-
with the racist activity?
No,
the camera
I
people,
believe he
My
had,
hand is
a
up.
direct answer to Councilwoman Dixon.
My hand is up. It was up before the last 4 speakers. Now, I know they give you preferential treatment. Are you going to accept it?
Councilman Guy, I just want Chief Tracy to answer Councilwoman Dixon.
Go ahead on.
We can go back to you. Okay.
Go ahead on and go ahead.
Everybody's
and
showing their colors.
They're showing he's one of the people that they're trying to run to after
Councilmember
they've been
Harlee,
oppressing us all these years.
Councilmember
And he's
Harlee,
accepting
and Councilmember
Racism.
McCoy are members of this committee. Are
My
members
hand
of
was
this
next.
committee. And I also called out the president for not sticking to the agenda.
My hand
So,
was next. It's been up
Councilmember Johnson,
before
it's
the
your
last 4
resolution.
speakers.
Yes.
You would like the
Chief
speaker,
Tracy,
you would like the
could you
chief to
answer
answer.
Councilwoman Dixon's question specifically?
That's sellout.
Absolutely. As far as the guide, the review, Councilman Johnson, you hit on it, the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies. They come in once a year and do a review to make sure that we're keeping the standards and our certification that a lot of other police departments don't have. They look at our policies. Not only are we up to the current standards of best practices, and they make suggestions to us to make sure, and we should be looking at it ourselves, but they also look to see if we're adhering to our policies, and that brings down lawsuits, makes a better police department. Yes, the answer is yes. And over the course of the past several months, we have been working with the law department to begin the process of reviewing all the WPD policy and procedures manual and performing the necessary actions that you hit on with FOIA and what we can and what we can release and what we can't. We're almost halfway through, but we're giving everything over to law, and more specifically with the use of force policies. We want to make sure that that's in this current environment. That's one of the things that everybody wants to take a look at, probably predominantly first before anything else. We should have all the redactions, the minimal redactions, ready for law to look at and hopefully for everyone's review shortly.
Okay, thank you very much, Chief. I believe the floor is yours, Councilman Guy.
Well, actually,
Depends on
Councilmember
if white
Harlee,
supremacy is
Councilmember
still-
Harlee, who is a member
Oh.
of the committee.
Sorry.
Thank you.
I don't mind deferring to Councilman Guy, and I can go after him.
Councilmember Guy,
Thank you for not deferring to white supremacy. In
keep
fact,
it up, Mr. Guy.
Councilwoman, you can say keep it up all you want. I got your voting record. And thank you, Councilwoman Harlee, because my recollection is when I put this up for a vote for us to have access to this book, if I remember correctly, you voted yes because you knew that that was needed. So when it gets posted tonight, you'll probably see yourself voting yes. Also, the chief is not being honest with the public. They have had a FOIA request from me for so long that it's difficult to determine how long it's been. And everything that the police and law department said that they were going to do, they lied. They did not provide this information. I was supposed to have a redacted version of this probably all the way back in April, and they just keep doing everything they can do to not respond. Okay, so I've put this on as legislation. Half of the people that's acting like they're so in favor of it, half of them voted against it. Now that the chief, I guess, and the mayor and whoever else now saying, okay, well, let's do that. Well, then probably what you ought to do, Mr. Johnson, is you know that you're stealing somebody's idea, but you're willing to do that for the white supremacists. That's not a good thing to do. Okay. Now, all of these issues that everybody's trying to talk about are new issues. This council and this government had opportunity to deal with them way back, years ago. Actually. There's actually a civilian review board
Mr. Guy,
legislation
if you're not
that's
going to stick
drafted.
to the subject, I'm having your
Somebody else
microphone
mentioned
turned off.
civilian review board, and I already put in and had legislation drafted for a civilian review board. Somebody else also just mentioned police officer Bill of Rights. If you look at the certain page in the police manual, you'll see that the police manual itself identifies aspects in it that respect the police officer's Bill of Rights, even the sections that deal with internal affairs and complete boards, okay, disciplinary boards. What happens, the way white supremacy works is
Mr.
if
Guy, stick to the white book
knows what he's doing,
or I'm having
then
your
you want to
microphone turned
interrupt
off.
anybody that's knowledgeable that ain't white. But unfortunately, you were successful, you and your cronies. If we had had a judiciary committee, all of you who keep getting cut off, the purpose of the judiciary committee was to deal with these civil rights issues so that the white supremacists who don't want you to get to speak, they didn't get to cut you off when we had a judiciary committee.
Oh,
It
for
was a
God's sake.
committee that cared
First of
about
all, I
civil
wasn't
rights
on council with you,
issues,
thank God.
such as the issues that we're talking about. Keep interfering, but you're showing your true feelings, okay? Because I'm talking about the business at hand. You voted against this being available. So you're gonna vote a no? You're gonna vote no again? Oh, okay. Let's watch and see. So everything that everybody's talking about doing, I think every one of them has been put on this agenda for city council. All the things I saw on that press release from city council, from the mayor and the president, it's all a bunch of fraud. They just stole and wrote down everything that I've set on the table. So this is theft, and I'll bring an amendment because now Johnson, if this passes, y'all see the game that you guys are playing.
I don't know who the staff member is
Okay. It ain't no
for
staff.
this.
It's not staff members. Staff
I don't know who
members
the
don't
staff
work
member is.
for the
As the
city
chair of this
council
committee,
like that.
I'm asking you to turn off his microphone.
Oh, okay, go ahead, white
File
supremacist.
charges against me, Mr. Guy.
I don't need to file charges against you. Your behavior, you're anti anything where a black man knows what he's talking about and a black woman knows what they're talking about.
And black men and women in this city knows that's amongst the biggest bunch of BS that's ever come out of your mouth.
Okay, so I'm gonna put in for a judiciary committee so we don't have to put up with you keeping black people from speaking and keeping the public from speaking. That's
No,
why it was
you
stopped
don't
in the
want
first
to.
place, so that these issues couldn't be addressed. You can tell the staff to turn off the mic, and that's what you do in white supremacist world. That's
Oh,
why the
please.
city got torn up, because you don't want to hear what black people have to say.
No, all
You
you
don't
want to
wanna
do
what
is
black
bother
people
coming to
done.
public safety meetings and trying to rip them
And
apart every single time. Your hatred for everybody, you're cancer. You're a cancer on this council. Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
would you like to sum this up, please?
Yes.
I was
Yes,
next.
Chairman. Thank you so much.
You forgot
Um,
Harlee.
Yeah, I was next.
Okay, yes, yes.
Oh,
Councilwoman
I'm sorry,
Harlee.
Councilwoman
Oh, that's
Harlee.
okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. So I heard the chief say that his team is going to be working on pulling, I guess, policies and things of that nature together. And due to the subject matter as it relates to the community feeling the way that they feel about police brutality and whites against blacks as it relates to basically white police officers abusing their authority and power towards blacks. And so I'm just asking kindly and respectfully, Chief, if you could have some African Americans working on whatever we're talking about as it relates to this matter. I think that would be additive to ensuring that there are African American men and women that are a part of the team that you're putting together to bring about some of these changes. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Councilman Harlee, absolutely. If you take a look at my command staff, in this room with me is Inspector Chuck Emery. If we really want to start talking about race, this is about all officers and all use of force. So so it's about all our officers because we're all working together for the same goal. Secondly, if to have that representation, who also oversees CALEA and all those other things, is Inspector Chuck Emery, and then on where it comes to policy and looking in towards the human resources, Captain Bowers, and then Captain Counts and Captain Fahim Akil. And then one of the persons that actually oversees our policy and helps write it is Sergeant Cintron, who is formerly Cummings, who is African-American. And I can continue to go where we go with several others within the unit, but I can start running through every police officer. So we do have a diverse thought, diversity in demographics that are all looking at these policies and have helped written them or change them or review them. And so, yes, the answer is yes. And the answer is that going through the names and additional people, I could start naming the whole police department, but I'd rather not do that. You can see with the leadership that we have, there is diversity of thought and there's diversity in demographics that are taking a look at our policies.
I appreciate that, Chief. And again, yes, I do realize that we have a diverse group of officers at the top of your leadership, but verbalizing it and coming out asking and making sure since we're on tape, I thought that it was good that we, just kind of have this little discussion because a lot of pressure is going to be on the city council members. And so we may know some of the good things that are going on and that you're doing and the positive things that are happening in the police department, but the community doesn't know that we're asking these questions. The community doesn't know that some of this is happening. So asking the questions will allow people to be able to come and look at our tapes and just know what's happening and trying to just be as transparent as possible, because I don't know about anyone else, but I'm getting all kinds of emails, all kinds of communications coming to me, as a city council member. What is council doing? What is council doing? What kind of accountability are we going to hold the Wilmington Police Department, the officers, etc. And my thing is that we have to work together. It's not the council against the police department or the administration. Well, I'm speaking for myself anyway. It's about working together, and we work together to bring about these changes and the solutions. So that's why I'm asking the questions. Not that I doubt anything, but I just wanted to be on record, Chief.
Councilmember Gray.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just like to agree with Councilwoman Harlee and thank her for saying that, because as I was saying, I thought this was a place to discuss things and let the public know, as she said, what questions we are asking and what information we may know, but we don't get an opportunity to get it out there except in discussions in committee meetings or on council floor. And I would hope before this committee meeting is over, we can go to the news releases, which make some statements to the public, and it's coming from the council president, and it will probably be discussed under this committee, public safety. So since it's already out in the public and I wasn't informed or discussed with the things that were stated, I would think this would be the platform to discuss them or inform me of how this is going to be accomplished, when you're going to get input from the rest of us, just some information. So hopefully before this committee meeting ends, we can have that type of discussion. Thank you.
Councilmember McCoy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to actually state for the record that I was actually one of the people who on the Public Safety Committee meeting who did not basically push this to full council. Because as I can recall, one of the things that the chief had stated was the fact that he would be, as a new chief, he was going to be going through the white book and they were going to be updating it. So I needed to find out whether or not that update, the update is actually taking place, because I've actually put in a request to get a chance to look at that white book maybe at the end of last year, because now I figured the update had taken place and there were some policies that I wanted to take a look at, and that hasn't happened yet. So I just wanted to see whether or not what you stated, so that the basic problem was there was going to be lots of redaction and we had some updates coming. Just wanted to make certain that all of that is taking place. So what we see on the white book is what should be there now. We will still not be waiting for any type of updates are not taking place.
Yes, ma'am. And parts of the white book are actually updated periodically. Some of the things, even with the use of force coming in as the new police chief, we looked at that. A lot of changes. Well, some changes were made as far as, because it was good policy, but there were certain things that needed to be updated as far as best practices, looking at other models that people implemented for incidents that might have happened in their city. And then looking at the Police Executive Research Forum, we work with these industry standards to come up with the best practices from throughout the nation. And even when it comes to the use of force or non-lethal force, in 2015, I was part of a membership that even went over to Scotland when I was working for another police department. And I've been part of de-escalation and made sure that we set the standards for the United States on de-escalation to reduce the amount of police-related shootings and/or involved in other types of use of force. So I'm actually quoted in it, and as part of one of those, I'm very proud that I looked at these standards and then continue to incorporate those things. Made sure that we incorporated it into our policy and our use of force policy, because there was changes that were being made as I came into the department, and I ensured a lot of those things have been done. That being said, it continued to review. Last year when things came out, there was an updated policy that was coming out nationally. I make sure that are we in compliance, or are we looking at that? And then, of course, with the incident that happened out in Minneapolis, of course, you want to take that out and say, has anything changed, or are we missing anything, to make sure that our officers know they're trained properly, and it's a constant review. So yes, and then as far as the redaction, we'll continue to look at that. Law department's getting things, we're not waiting for us to redact the whole policy, which is up to almost 5,000 pages, but we're already sent things over so law department can look at it, so we can start to get some of these things out, like we talked about at previous public safety committee meetings.
Bless you.
Madam President, I'm sorry, Madam Chair, I
Yes.
just wanted to also add that the reason why I asked to sit down and get a chance to look at that white book again after all of these corrections or updates happen is because I wanted to be certain the resolution that I asked for the safe and inclusive community, that we were basically see if the city was in compliance with what I hoped would happen when it came to how our police officers treated the citizens, or the residents rather, here in the city of Wilmington, if they may not be documented.
Thank you. We've also had a request from Tanya Washington to speak.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Walsh. I just wanted for the record, state for the record that, over the course of this past week, we have taken a look at the use of force policy along with the chief. And that particular part of the policy has been given over to the city solicitor's office for their review. And we're hoping to have that made public by the end of the week.
Thank you. Does any member of the public wish to make any comments? Vanessa Fisher? Are you here?
Hi.
Hi, Vanessa.
Hi. I'm just curious to know what part of the agenda where we can bring up funding for the police?
That you can bring up what?
Funding,
Not this meeting.
not this. So when does that happen? And is the public invited to that conversation?
Well, the public can make requests for things like that most anytime. This is a committee meeting that already has a set agenda.
Right.
So you have to stick to the agenda. And if you would like that for the next meeting, we'd be happy to put it on. That meeting is not until July, though.
Okay.
If you would like it addressed by council, you can speak to council at our next council meeting. That even remotely, you can speak to us and ask us to address it.
Okay.
And, you know, you're more than happy to come in and do that, or not come in, but you know what I mean.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other member of the public? Seeing none, Councilmember Johnson, do you want to close us out?
Yes, and again, I think it's been robust discussion, which I believe is healthy. And I think this again is step one. You know, we literally, amid the trauma of last week, you know, we made the formative steps to put this in place within 48 hours, you know, after last Saturday. So, you know, this is again is step one in unified voice. And I look forward to having everyone's support at the, I believe it's the June 18th City Council meeting. Thank you.
Okay, you don't need to vote on a resolution.
Nope.
So, okay, the next resolution is yours also, Councilmember.
Okay. Thank you, Chairwoman. This resolution is something that, you know, again, it's something that I wish we didn't have to do in the year 2020, but I believe it's necessary. This resolution is acknowledging racism as a public health epidemic, similar to how City Council has been tackling gun violence recently as a public health epidemic. And we've been seeing more and more reports, even over the weekend, Washington Post talked about this, is how racism has infected the country, or has always infected the country, you know, similar to other diseases that we face. And so we must take a health outlook at this and how it's affecting the minds of our communities. And so to springboard off of this, you know, what we're looking for is not only to recognize racism as a public health epidemic, but to work with our community and make sure that as a city, we are not just, you know, not racist, but we are anti-racist. As a city, our city policies in dealing with minority and, you know, small businesses, those have to be addressed. Also looking at our vendor selections and our grant management processes within the city of Wilmington, those need to be anti-racist. Because even, you know, in my time in council, I've seen that time and time again with our contracting, with our vendor, with our DBEs, with public works and law department, you know, we are not putting disadvantaged communities first. And specifically, we're not looking at communities of color. And I know a lot of my colleagues have talked about this time and time again, and yet it's the same issue. So now I believe it's time to finally address this and step up as a council. And, you know, we're going to look to our community partners in the community, our education partners, our employment partners, our criminal justice partners, to put policies together as a city that we can successfully make sure that the city of Wilmington is truly a place to be somebody. And that's really, we can go into the reasons of the riots and what happened and what didn't happen. But our job on council is now to look at the future and look at the future, how we can move together as a unified Wilmington. And we have to put egos aside. We have to put who gets credit for what aside. And we have to look forward to working as a unified people. And especially on council with as many wonderful Black women and Black men leading this council, we should be unified in putting these policies in place. So I appreciate that we're now getting this dialogue in action, in working with the administration. They've been very receptive and recognize this as well, as our mayor put together a great op-ed, the past few days about racial injustice. So this is just, again, the tip of the iceberg. It's going to take a heavy lift from human resources. It's not going to be an instant gratification event, but it's going to be, as Council President has said and Chairwoman Walsh has said, looking at the policies, breaking them down, spending the time sitting down with the department heads and looking at where we can improve. And for that, I really ask for my colleagues' support to not only put this resolution forward, but eventually codify this in the city code and charter, so that we are an anti-racist community. We'd be the first in Delaware to do this, and I believe other jurisdictions should be doing it as well. Thank you.
Councilmember Harlee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say to my council member colleague, Councilman Johnson, that I think that this is a great piece of legislation and I would like to be added as a co-sponsor. I just want to say that I think in 2017, when I first got on council, I had begun to look through our through the Muni Code and looking at the different policies as it related to how Black and Brown people, what we had on the books. And what I learned was that we have legislation on the books, but it's not being reinforced. Okay, it's not being reinforced. So that's one of the reasons why I want to be added as a co-sponsor. And I realize, as it relates to the 10% and different percentages here, different percentages there, when I inquired about, okay, we have laws on the book, but if we're not reinforcing them, then what's the point in having them on the book? So I hope that this will be that opportunity for us to work together with the different departments where these codes are linked to see how we can really, put some muscle in really moving the needle to reach the percentages that are actually on the book. So I just wanted to share that with you, that looking at what's already there is going to be, I think, will be a good first step. See what's, and see how we can reinforce or embellish what's already on the books, and then take it from there. But I did learn that there are some, good policies out there, but they're not being reinforced. So hopefully this will be a good opportunity for us to, move the needle. And now that I guess, what is going on has everybody's attention. And I do believe that we all, are in this space wanting the same thing, and that wanting the same thing, meaning for us to be a more unified city and state, okay, as it relates to races and color. So that's my hopes in terms of what you're talking about as it relates to trying to bring about a change with all that's going on in our state and in our country. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Council President Shabazz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In one who is, definitely a sponsor on this legislation, and knowing what all that needs to be done, yes, there are a lot of items on the book, and it's for us to become exactly what that legislation is proposing. It's really going to take the cooperation of not just government in enforcing regulations and the administration implementing those policies and practices, but it's also going to take, as I have said before, the importance of our residents coming to our civic associations, so that we live in diverse communities, and so getting to know each other a little bit more and understand and respect each other's differences, and learn each other's ways and cultures, so that the misunderstanding or misinterpretation of individuals is not taken into account. So We can put policies in place, but if we don't get it, if we don't start talking with each other and communicating and respecting people's differences, then you're right, Councilwoman Harlee, it'll be more legislation on the books that's not enforced because it can't be enforced unless the people practice it. So I do hope that we as a legislative branch demonstrate through our collaboration and coming together for one cause, and that is to create policy so that we do have a non-racist operating city. And we don't have policies that lead toward that. But it's going to take us getting a chance to learn of each other, respecting each other's differences and working together. So I'm glad to be a co-sponsor on this piece of legislation.
And I just want to follow that up, Council President. I appreciate the sentiment from you and Councilwoman Harlee, because I think looking at what we've gone through even as a trauma in the community, you know, and that we want the community to know this, that, you know, a lot of the practices are not set up to be specifically racist, but then have racist effects on the community. So that's what we look for. I mean, if you even look for the COVID-19 funding that has been available to small businesses, a lot of the disadvantaged and minority businesses that could not avail themselves of it because they didn't have the basic tools to know how to navigate the financial system or have pre-existing relationships. So as a city, you know, how can we kind of fill that gap and work with them? So that's just an example of how a policy that wasn't intentionally made to be racist, of course, ends up having a racist effect. And that's called systemic racism, which is what we face as a society. Same thing with school admissions, same issue. So that's just something we're just, again, addressing, and we're going to be the leaders screaming that, you know, Wilmington needs more support even from the state on being able to dismantle this racist system.
Thank you, Councilmember Johnson. Council members, anyone else? Would anyone from the public like to speak this evening? See no one. Again, this is, oh, I'm sorry. Aaron Goldner, please. Aaron?
Sorry.
Aaron Goldner.
Yes, when you click the button, it then gives the person in the public a notification if they want to be unmuted or not. So then the person has to push that also. It's an extra step. But anyway, my name's Aaron Goldner. I just wanted to appreciate that resolution that was just put forth and really take a look at school districts and school funding. That I support that. Thank you.
Thank you. That's it. Okay, I guess that's it. Councilmember Johnson. Again, we
Yes.
don't have to vote on this?
No, Chairwoman, and I believe this resolution will be presented to the full council on, I believe, June 18th.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Make sure my name was added to it too, Councilmember, please.
Thank you.
And on the one before. Okay, we'll go to the Wilmington Fire Department. Is somebody from the fire department here this evening?
Council President, Chief Tracy.
You're here for the fire department?
No, I'd like to, it's very difficult on Zoom when to jump in. Would you like us to stay to the fire department's items, or can I dismiss?
No,
the
no, there's no reason.
Okay.
You probably have some of your rank and file who still haven't had any sleep, so go do what you have to do.
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Councilman and Councilwoman.
Okay, who do we have from the fire department?
Madam Councilwoman?
Ms. Walsh, oh, Charlotte, are you doing it?
I am. Chief Donahue is on the call, but I am presenting the binding interest arbitration, a summary of the binding interest arbitration agreement.
Right.
Okay.
And I think council members have to understand that this is a court order. This is what the court is telling the city of Wilmington that we have to do. So there isn't any legislation really. I mean, is that correct?
That is correct, Madam Chairperson. This is ordered by the Public Employers Relations Board. The city has been ordered to implement this contract. And just a summary for those who may or may not be familiar with the process as it relates to collective bargaining and the final step. Binding interest arbitration is the final step for either the employer or the union to reach an agreement. And it's not a place that either party wants to be, but that's where we found ourselves with this agreement. And after our negotiations, after mediation, after both sides, or after the city exercising its right after there was impasse to go to binding interest arbitration, and even with the executive director facilitating an agreement, we were still not able to come to a resolution. And so now this contract that was the city's offer has been ordered. I will start with the term of the agreement. The agreement extends through 6/30/2023. That's the term of the agreement. I wanted to make sure, and I'm sure you've heard or read, but I wanted to be clear. The biggest issue with this contract, the bone of contention, or the matter of contention, not bone of contention, that's poor choice of words, but the biggest disagreement between the union and the administration or the city was the shift change. There was a mutual goal on behalf of the administration and the fire department to eliminate, or essentially eliminate, rolling bypass. And the difference was the way in which it was going to be done. And the shift change, we did some research. We used Public Financial Management, a national firm that does this kind of work, and they gave us a couple of different scenarios and shifts that we can choose from. You may recall or have heard during the our contract negotiations, we did ask PERB to confirm the city's ability to decide the platoon structure for the department, and that was affirmed by PERB. So the issue was more one of the shift change. This contract transitions the department from a 4-platoon system to a 3-platoon system. And on a 3-platoon system, the existing shift of 24/72 does not operate on a 3-platoon system. The shifts on that system would be a 24/48, just 24 hours on, 48 hours off. A 3-3-3, which for those of us who's been around for a while, that was the old shift the firefighters were on before they went to 24/72. And then there's a 48/96 where they would come to work and be at work for 48 hours and then be off for 96 hours. That's popular on the West Coast. The contract as it exists, allows the chief to decide what shift that he would like the department to work. He or she decide what shift that they would like the department to work. But it has been communicated to the fire department as far back. Well, one, in our negotiations, we talked about the 24/48. The chief notified the department back in November about the 24/48 officially. The facilitated agreement that was not adopted by the union established the 24/48 schedule, and that is the shift that the chief intends to implement, the 24/48 schedule. The compensation for the order was that there would be a 2% cost of living adjustment in each of the 4 fiscal years. fiscal 19, fiscal 20, fiscal 21, and fiscal 22. That's a 2% cost of living adjustment in each of those 4 years. And commencing with the implementation of the new system, there would be a 16% tax increase. In essence, the fire department will be working more hours than they currently do. They'll be working 14.3% more hours than they currently do. And so the 14.3% of that 16 was a reflection of them working those hours. So you need to pay them for them. And then there was an additional premium of 1.7% that we added to that as well. Of significance is that currently any overtime the firefighter works does not count towards their pension. But
Yes.
this increase would certainly count towards their pensions and would significantly increase the amount of a firefighter's pension. The final item that was a part of this order was exchange days. And the chief can might be able to jump in and add some additional commentary about this. But exchange days are days that the firefighters can exchange. You know, they get their schedule a year in advance, and a year in advance, you know, life happens within a year, and you might need to be off on a day that you're scheduled to work. So firefighters are allowed or permitted to exchange. And in the existing contract, I don't believe there was a limit on the number of times that individuals could exchange. So there were two issues. One was training and consistency of being with your platoon and your officers of your platoon that made training and supervision and things of that nature challenging with all of the exchanges that were taking place. But also, and I do not want to say that this was widespread within the department, but there were instances, and not just one, there were several instances of where firefighters would have exchanges and they would be off 3 months at a time because they had exchanged that number of days. This contract requires that they repay an exchange day. So if someone works for me, before I can have exchange with somebody else, I have to repay that exchange day. And that will limit some of the extended absences that were taking place within the department. And I'm going to turn it over to Chief Donahue to clear up anything as far as exchange days that I did not accurately represent.
Chief?
Yes, Madam Chair. Exchange days. It was agreed with the union that not everybody takes a significant amount of exchange days. Most guys average 3 or 4. However, some guys were taking 16, 17 exchange days in the course of a year where you only work 91 tours. So it became a burden on the department since they were working 1 on and 3 off to effectively schedule training, supervision for their men, accountability to their company. So it wasn't the whole department doing this, but there needed to be some limits. And since it was around 3 or 4 per person, we upped it to 6 tours, which is 6 complete 24 hours, or 12 units, which are 12 12-hour units, so they can exchange for emergencies. And that, as for educational days, we promote education. So educational days are unlimited as long as they're taking a proper course and they get the approval through the department.
Is somebody going to provide us with a cheat sheet on all of this?
I can,
yeah,
yes,
if you could.
I can absolutely do that. I will certainly do that and get that to you, Madam Chair. It's been a challenge because, as you know, with anything, there are appeal rights, and Local 1590 has exercised its right to appeal the executive director's decision. They've asked for an expedited ruling and an expedited hearing. And so on Monday,
Are you kidding me?
I am not.
Thank you.
So there are briefs that are due on Wednesday. And then on Monday, there will be an expedited hearing. However, that expedited hearing is only on the issue of whether or not a stay will be granted. So what they've asked for is they're not only appealing the decision, but they want to, they're requesting that the city not be permitted to implement the contract until the appeal has been decided. That hearing is Monday, and so I'd have more of an answer, but if the bottom line at this point, as I sit here today, if there is not a stay granted, the city is moving forward with implementing the new shift on July 1st of 2020 in a mere 21 days.
Well, why don't you wait until, because it's going to be a very short amount of time until the stay is granted or not, correct?
Correct. Monday.
So why don't you just wait to see what happens?
Okay.
If they do, if they do get to go forward, then the information you have might be incorrect anyway.
Correct. So what I'll do is after Monday's hearing, I'll make sure that we get a summary of the status at that point to you.
Okay, thank you.
Should I send it to, who should I send it to, or how should that be directed? To the committee?
Yes, please.
Okay, we'll do. We'll do.
Council members, anyone have questions here? Michelle, or I'm sorry, Councilmember Harlee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The only question I have is this just like a routine kind of contract type of thing that's coming up, or is this something that's interim or what?
No, so we enter into agreements with each of our collective bargaining units, and they run a term depending upon what we agree to. So this contract is one that wasn't negotiated. It's being ordered by the Public Employers Relations Board because we could not come to a decision. The city and the fire department could not agree on a deal. And so we went through the process that the state outlines for resolving collective bargaining differences.
Okay. And so based on this decision, how is this impacting the budget?
Well, the 2% for each of the forward years would have to be budgeted and taken care of in the budgets for each of the years going forward. As I mentioned, there was a 2% that was due fiscal 19, and that 2% that is due fiscal 19 is going to cost the city $254,000 in this current fiscal year. Also, what I failed to mention, and I do apologize, is that on 7/1 of 20, they would be getting a $1,250 one-time payment as well. And that $1,250 one-time payment is another $225,000. So for fiscal 20, the current fiscal year that we are in, the cost of the contract would be roundly $482,000, of which the $254,000 is baked already into the budget. A 2% increase for fire was already included in the existing budget.
And so lastly, this is a little complicated, but I do follow you.
Okay.
I follow you. So are they going to get like a little bonus?
Well, the city doesn't traditionally give bonuses, but there is a $1,250 one-time payment. You will hear members of the unions say that that's their signing bonus, okay? But there is a $1,250 one-time payment for Local 1590, yes. And Councilmember Harlee, I am absolutely available and will make myself available to sit down and provide any detail, any additional detail, or answer any questions that you may have. And that offer is extended not only to you, but to any member of council that has any questions. Feel free at any time to give me a call and I'll sit down one-on-one and walk you through.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Gray.
I just want to know, is the fire department fully staffed, or do they have some vacancies? And if they do, are they going to be able to fill those vacancies this budget year? Thank you.
The fire department right now, Chief, correct me if I'm wrong, they have 2 vacancies.
We have 4 vacancies.
They have 4 vacancies within the fire department. However, we have to have enough people to start a class, and that number to start a class would be 8 vacancies. So at this point, they only have 4. We would need to have 4 more vacancies before a resolution would be presented to council that indicated the desire to have a class.
May I continue?
Yes,
Does
Councilmember.
that cause problems in scheduling with being 4 down? I mean, when you get 6 down, you don't have 8. Is that another problem with scheduling? I don't know.
So because the order is for a 3-platoon system versus a 4-platoon system, there are floating officers. So they're floating positions because now we have, in essence, additional firefighters because we went from a 4-platoon system to a 3-platoon system. So we would be able to absorb those 4 vacancies at this point, unless the chief has a different opinion.
No, with the new schedule, we have more men per platoon, so it's a little easier to take hits on vacancies. But I'm authorized to put in a resolution when I'm 8 down, and it usually takes us approximately 4 months to get through the hiring process. So there's always a potential to have more vacancies, but with the new platoon, we'll be able to handle more vacancies.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Anyone else on council? Any member of the public who would like to ask any questions? Seeing none?
Oh,
Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember McCoy. I didn't even see you.
Thank you. I'm so sorry because I've been back and forth trying to listen. And so I do apologize, Ms. Barnes. I just wanted to, I was trying to get from my other colleagues whether or not anyone stated anything about, it was, I believe it was an increase of insurance, but then also you talked about the COLA, and whether or not the amount of insurance that increased, did it cancel out basically what they received in COLA? I'm sorry if you spoke about it before, but I had stepped away.
No, very, very valid question, Councilmember McCoy. So you'll recall for every other contract that I've been before this body with, we have increased the healthcare, the percent of healthcare premium that all employees, including yourselves, pay for your benefits. This order makes the firefighters on par with everyone else. The firefighters have had no increase in their health benefits since 2016 when their contract expired. So this brings them up to speed with where everybody else is paying the 10 and 12%. And quite honestly, as we speak right now, the benefits division is on a call with the fire department, walking through how they would be able to take advantage of the 2% reduction through getting their annual physical. And if you, with the increase that the firefighters receive, I am fairly certain, I'm going to say highly confident, that the raises that are awarded more than pay for the increase in the healthcare.
Okay. All right. So I do have understanding now. So it won't be as though they actually lost money, but it may just even out.
Well, respectfully, currently firefighters, based on the last time they had an increase, they're paying roundly about 4% of cost for their benefits. Everyone else is paying 10, well, Local 320 is paying 4, 5, and 6 because they're still out of contract, but everyone else is paying 10 and 12%. And quite frankly, been paying 10 and 12% for a few years now. So they've had the benefit of lower premiums when everybody else has been paying higher premiums. Now their premiums will be on par with the other city employees, non-union, elected, appointed, 1102, police, both captains and inspectors. Their benefits will be the same as everyone else's. It took a while to get them there, but their benefits will be the same as everyone else's. And like I mentioned, when you add the salary increases that will take place, the salary increases, particularly when you add the 16% for the shift, that's going to more than pay for their whatever their increase in premiums are. That's going to take care of it. I can run the numbers for you to the lowest paid person, but I'm fairly certain that I'm accurate there. In fact, I'll run those numbers and let you know with confidence tomorrow.
Okay. My other last question was, about that, basically the salary. So because everyone is salaried, it's not going to be much. It's not going to be much difference, even though they've actually added 13 more days to their calendar.
Well, they've added more days, work days that they're coming to the office, and that is 14.3% more time that they're to the office, that they're coming to the station. And so that 16% takes care of that, right? So we went in knowing that if you're going to ask them to work more, you need to be prepared to pay them more. So not only did we do the 14.3%, which is the actual number of hours that more, we added 1.7% in premium on top of that. So they're getting the 2% here, and they're getting the 14.3% for the increased hours they're working, 2% for each of the fiscal years, and an additional 1.7% in recognition of the fact that we're asking them to work more.
All right. Thank you so much, Ms. Barnes, for explaining that.
You're so welcome.
Anyone else, any council members? Okay, Councilmember Johnson.
Yes, just tying some things up in terms of the process. So Wednesday is the hearing. Then I guess depending upon the hearing, Director Barnes, we should have finalized numbers, correct?
Wednesday is the briefing.
Okay.
The briefs are due on Wednesday, and expedited hearing is on Monday. Okay. Numbers in terms of what it's going to cost, we have that information. Okay. But what I think, to Councilmember Walsh's point, if a stay is granted, those numbers would change because we would not be implementing the shift at that time. So I believe that was the basis for her asking to wait until we had an answer to provide the information.
Just another follow-up question, kind of just on that end. Do you have an approximation of how much in legal bills that the city has spent so far through this protracted litigation?
I don't have that number top of mind, but we use outside counsel for most of our negotiations. I'm doing the crossing guards, just me, I'm doing them. And the last one I did with captains and inspectors, I did that one alone as well. But when you have something as complicated and I'll stop with complicated as implementing a shift change. That was something that we knew going in was going to be a steep hill to climb, but the administration was very clear that it was the right thing to do if we were going to achieve our mutual goal. We had the same goal that the fire department had: eliminate rolling bypass. So either you are going to continue to have rolling bypass, or hire more hire more firefighters, or you're going to have to do something different. And after much research, the decision was go to a 3-platoon system, which is what they had worked. The chief can say how many years, but they had worked that shift or that since inception until we went to the 2472 back in 2006, I believe.
Okay, and so just follow up on that. So now that the rolling bypass is going to, that practice is going to stop, then they each firehouse will be then staffed on a full-time basis.
Fully staffed, because right now with the 4-platoon system, you need 35 officers at the beginning of each shift. You won't need as many officers at the beginning of each shift, and you have more firefighters, and the ability to put all of your trucks into service consistent. Okay, and so I heard you say that practice would stop. It will be essentially eliminated. The need to do it because you have extra bodies will not be necessary. However, I can't sit here and say there will never be a time that the chief would never have to implement rolling bypass. So I didn't want to say that. I didn't want to walk away with someone saying it is stopped and it's never going to happen. That's
And then,
what the administration said it will essentially eliminate the need for them, yes.
and then just one final follow-up, if I may, Chairwoman, is in terms of the 2448, is this in line with other departments around the country? The 2448, is that typical?
That shift, and the chief's going to be able to quote you very specifically. I know Chicago uses the shift, and other departments use the shift. So depending upon the platoon that you have, that determines the shift. And some shifts are more popular than others. Some are more popular on the West Coast than they are on the East Coast. I wish that I could take credit for being smart enough to design a shift, but that didn't happen, right? These shifts, the shifts that work on a 3-platoon system is the 2448, the 3-3 and 3, or the 4896. And I know, like I said, I know Chicago. And Chief, can you remind me of the other cities that have this shift?
One that's very close is Vineland, New Jersey, a small department. Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It's not something we made up. It's a shift that's been around for years and years and years.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
I have no further questions.
Thank you, council member. Okay, well, thank you. Now, we don't have a resolution, do we?
No, because remember this is ordered, so there will be no action by the council.
Right. And also, if it hasn't been overturned, we'd have to wait until that decision was made too.
Correct,
So
ma'am.
resolution would be useless somewhat. All right, well, I appreciate, Mr. Adams, Councilmember Adams.
Yes, I just wanted to comment on the chief's last statement with regard to that this 48-hour policy is used by Vineland, New Jersey. As most of you know, I grew up in South Jersey, and Vineland is actually land-wise the largest city in the state of New Jersey. So if coverage is a concern and they can cover all of Vineland, they can certainly cover Wilmington. As far as coverage is concerned, Chief, do you have any problem with them being able to cover these distances with the city of Wilmington on this shift?
No, I feel the amount of apparatus, 6 edges and 2 ladders, is appropriate. And again, the shift is a shift that's used all over the country. So I see no problems.
Great. Thank you, Chief Donahue. That's all I need to know. Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
Thank you, Councilmember McCoy.
Yes, actually, I just had one last question for the chief. Just wanted to know how things were going. I know that this was a contentious fight, and just wanted to know how morale was with the rest of our firefighters.
Morale is not the greatest. As Ms. Barnes told you, they're appealing the decision. There's many guys that are ready to move on and have accepted this shift. And there's a lot of guys that still want the old shift. So it's a mix, but it's business as usual. They're out there doing the job every day.
Thank you, Chief.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Harlee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have one quick question for the chief. So what are they mainly disgruntled about, chief?
The shift.
Okay. Okay. So they have to work more for the same amount of money?
Now they're getting a raise, but they're working more hours. And with the more hours, they get what's called a Kelly day. Every 6 tours that they work, they get an extra day off, which gives them a 5-day break, 5 straight days off every month.
Okay.
Councilmember Harlee.
Yes.
I think the HR director said she would sit down with you personally, and I'm only recommending this because to understand how their shifts work, you really kind of need to see it on paper to believe it.
Okay.
Because it goes, like, even when the HR director was just explaining all this to all of us, you know, within the last hour, I kind of laughed in the middle of it and thinking, nothing she's saying is my brain retaining. Because she was using so many numbers and so many variations, but when she puts it on paper and shows it to you, it's pretty astounding, actually.
Okay. No, I respect that, and I will, if I have additional questions. I was just thinking at a high level, you know, in my mind, they're getting a bonus, and I'm like, okay, so what could they be disgruntled about? But I'm sure, you know, it's pretty much like, you know, what the chief has said. So if I have additional questions, I'll reach out, and I thank you for that suggestion.
Thanks. Anyone else? No one from the public still? Okay, with that, can I have a motion to adjourn? Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Charlotte.
You're welcome, Madam Chair.
Second.
Second, hearing that, this meeting is over. Thank you, everyone, for your time.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Amanda? Amanda? Anybody?
Yes, we're turning the live stream off.
Oh, you're turning it off?
Yes.
Well, I want to talk to you.
Do not end the meeting, just end the stream.
Everything's done. The station's off and the YouTube stream stopped, and then this is stop recording.